the love story for them, at least within the camp, is, I think, they represent sort of a beacon for one another. They're each other's reason to be, and they're the purpose, and they're the reason why they kind of are able to go about their lives. Because I think we felt like it was such a unusual thing to be able to fall in love in a place like that, because to hold any kind of space in your heart for any kind of joy, to be able to give love, to receive love, we started thinking about it on set almost like an act of defiance, of not allowing yourself to be dehumanized to the point where you can no longer have any kind of human emotion.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you for watching, and thank you for staying. Jonah, thank you. Congratulations.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, I know as an actor, it is literally your job to go from role to role, disappear into things, be diverse. But I have to think that playing Lali Sokoloff meant something to you. It was a little bit different than the others.
Definitely. Thanks for having me, everyone. Yes, thanks. Definitely it meant something different. I think from the very beginning, the whole project meant something different to me. It went so much further than just a professional gig. Both the story we were telling and what it would mean to take on a role like this.
What about the role appealed to you in the first place?
It was story first. I read the book back in 2018 when it came out, and was very struck by it, found it very unique to find a love story. And in a place like this, I found it very surprising, almost implausible. And I was really immediately invested in Lali and Geeta and their love and their story. And so then they called me a few years later and said, we're thinking of making this. And I went along for a meeting and pitched my little heart out. And they very kindly said, listen, we'd love to do this with you. And so I think, usually when you're choosing your roles, there's like a few different criteria, and you're looking at, how can I do something different that feels varied to anything I've done before? How can I challenge myself intellectually? How can I challenge myself as an actor? And how can I tell a story that feels powerful and meaningful in some way? And usually it doesn't encompass all of those things. Sometimes it doesn't encompass any of those things. And so this was a rare case where all of those boxes were ticked.
What do you mean specifically that you had to pitch your heart out? Was it?
Usually as a young actor, I'm very used to trying very hard to get any kind of role. And there's usually a long audition process, and and usually you're kind of begging people for work. But I think this story meant so much to me, and I wanted to be involved. I felt like this story needed to be told. I felt like there was a place for it in a television medium that could go further than the book. And I wanted so much to honor Lali and honor his life by trying to take on the role. So I told them how much I loved it. I told them what I felt I could bring, and they believed me. So.
Yeah. and I mean, in case it's not clear from that first episode, there really was Lali Sokoloff. He died like 15 years.
2006, I think it was.
Yeah. And he did tell his story to Heather Morris, and who wrote the book. Yeah, exactly.
In the book, you don't get so much of a sense of how this story came to be and how Lali came to give his account to Heather. It's just an epilogue, but we felt, and the writers and producers felt, it was a really interesting part of it, because as you, I think, start to see from the first episode, so much of this story is about memory and trauma, but it really came about and came to light in such an unlikely way. He was, as you see, he had never really spoken too much about his time there, as is understandable and it's quite normal, I think. And Heather was an aspiring writer, and she spent 3 years with him, many hours over the course of many weeks, and slowly started to draw this story out of him as he had the courage to tell it.
Yeah, it's interesting how some survivors want to tell their story, and some of them just keep it inside until the right moment. And Lali didn't tell it until after Gita had passed away, and it's interesting.
Yeah, certainly in the most part. I mean, there were some limited testimonies that he gave in the 90s to the Shoah Foundation, but really, certainly the most part of his experience, he couldn't really bring himself to talk about. And he said something very moving to Heather, which was that when Gita had passed away, he felt like he couldn't go and be with her until he had let this go, until he had started to talk about it, and he wanted more than anything just to be with her. So it felt like the time was right.
Well, obviously you've done your research. Did you do anything else to prepare for the role?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I did was I got on a plane and I went to Poland, and I went to Auschwitz, partly to pay my respects, but also I'd been as a young man as part of a history trip, and I felt like it was important to go maybe as, a slightly older person, but also in light of doing the project, to start trying to really see the camp through Lali's lens. So much of the book and the show is about his day-to-day life and his routine and the geography of the camp, and I really wanted to get a sense of that, knowing his specific story, so that I could try and see it from his lens.
And what was that experience like for you?
It's overwhelming every time. I don't know if anyone else has been. It's very hard to articulate. It's an extremely profound experience going. They do a wonderful job at trying to present a picture of what it would have been like to be there in a way that feels respectful, but it's it's a very dark place.
And then you don't look similar to what we see on the screen. I feel like we'd be hard pressed to recognize you, actually. Tell us a little bit about your physical transformation. Obviously, you shaved your head. What else?
Yeah, the shaving of the head thing, I thought that was just going to be the easiest part of the job. In another scenario, it's just a haircut, and I felt like it could be pretty innocuous. But then when it came to doing it, everyone that had to do it, I think, had quite a moving experience, because you watch it being done, and then like in the walls around you, there are all these references and images of people who were there, and the association of looking in the mirror and looking a certain way, and obviously you start to think about why your head was shaved and kind of the dehumanization tactics and trying to strip people of their identity in a very effective way. So it became very poignant. And then when it came to the losing weight and that kind of thing, I think it wasn't really sort of an acting exercise or anything like that. It just felt like within the confines of a television drama, and there are restrictions when you're trying to tell a story like this in this medium. Our job was to try and present the story in a respectful way and in as a compelling way, and the best way to do that was to make it as believable, I guess, within the four sides of the screen, and looking a certain way was just part of it. So.
You know what? It's not even just the hair and like the body. It's just like even the expression in your eyes is completely different. Talking to you versus what we see in the series. Yeah. Yeah,
I suppose it's the being there. I imagine is it was completely unimaginable, and it was sucking the life out of everyone there, both literally and figuratively. And so I think there is a particular atmosphere that's created in the camp, and I feel like you felt that in the prisoners and in the performances.
What was the set like? I mean, it's such a heavy series. Do they try to keep it light, or is tell us what it was like?
Yeah, we shot in Slovakia, and I'm sure lots of filming goes on over in Eastern Europe now. There's brilliant crews over there and wonderful locations. But also, Lali is from Slovakia, and he's from that town, Krumpaki, and was working in Bratislava. And so there was definitely an added resonance of doing the show there. The camp itself was built by our amazing production design team, Stevie Herbert. The architectural blueprints of Auschwitz are available. You can find them, so you can really recreate it to quite an astonishing accuracy, which is it's a very strange place to go to work every day, because you think that the best way of serving the story and honouring Lali's memory and everyone's memory is by bringing a level of professionalism and focus every day, knowing that you have a job to do to tell the story. But it was just impossible for it to not have this really profound effect on you. And the set was a massive part of that. They built a lot of it, and it was then enhanced by the VFX team. But it was it was surreal going there every day.
I mean, and how do you not take it home with you?
I think you probably just do.
Yeah.
I don't think we wanted. I think it wasn't like people were trying to be really depressed or sad all the time, because I don't think that was, I don't really know who that would have been serving. But at the same time, it was impossible to keep it light, because in the way that you would on a normal set, because being in that place, reenacting the scenes, people were so committed, I think, both in front of and behind camera to do this story justice, that there was inevitably just a different atmosphere on set. But we looked after each other, and I think usually, at the weekends we would try and explore a bit of Bratislava and get ourselves away from it so that we could be really energized and focused and ready to go on the Monday morning. But it was definitely unlike any other job I've done before.
Were you friendly with Jonas, who plays the Nazi SS officer, or is it hard to draw a line? I mean, even going that far?
He's honestly a beautiful man, and I don't really. Everyone has their own process and their own method. Personally, I don't really subscribe to the idea that I had to create a tension or an animosity with him off screen. Mm-hmm. For me, the most helpful thing was to make sure that I could trust him and had a friendship with him, because we were doing things that felt so frightening and upsetting. And so very early on, I made it my mission to be as close with him as I could, because I think we felt like there was a clear line between on screen and off, and to be able to enact some of those scenes, and there's much more to come. I think episode 1, dare I say it, it kind of eases the audience in, and it's very violent, and it's very scary, and I needed to sort of counterintuitively feel safe with him, and I needed to feel like we could be completely committed and give it everything and be incredibly present, and then when they called cut, we could sort of put our arms around each other.
He's in scenes with Harvey Keitel. He's literally haunted by him. Did you have any scenes with Harvey at all? Or
yeah, I was so when they told me that Harvey was going to be playing the older version, you can imagine how happy I was.
Yeah, until you realize that
I didn't spend a single minute on screen with him.
Right, yeah.
Livid. Honestly, it was very disappointing, and but no, such an honor to play the same role, and obviously we were thinking a lot about how we create continuity between the two roles, between the two performances, and I think mainly that came from the same preparation and research. So we were drawing from the same source material. We were looking at Lali's testimonies in particular, talking to Heather Morris, who spent so many years with him. And that was a really good starting place. But we also, whilst we wanted to capture the same essence and capture his humanity and his humor even, and some of his charisma and spirit, we also wanted the performances to breathe. They were very different times in his life, very different context, many decades in between. So we didn't want to restrict each other. I would never want to restrict Harvey Keitel from doing anything that he wants to do. But and I think we had to just trust our director that we would find a through line and find some continuity.
So you did end up obviously meeting him and talking to him.
I haven't met him.
You haven't?
which is probably the biggest biggest disappointment of the whole shoot. The reality of the production schedule was that I was shooting for about 3 or 4 months in Bratislava, and then Harvey, he's a wanted man. He could kind of come in right at the last minute, and I think I felt at times when I first sort of became aware that might be the case, it did actually fill me with a bit of concern, and then. But then when I realised that we had this incredible director, Tali, she really put me at ease, and she said, if anything, it would have been a great honour to have met him, but in terms of how we were preparing our roles, I think there was something about, like I said, wanting us to be drawing from the same source material, but really allowing each other to approach it from very different places, because we were very different people at those times in our life.
So now I'm impressed that you both created such a similar character without having met, and B, I feel a little bad for you. I feel like we gotta make it happen.
I mean, if you can organize this.
I know. Can someone here?
If anyone here knows him, give him a ring.
I want to talk about 2 scenes that we just saw in that first episode. Number 1, and just in terms of giving the tattoos, is that something that you have to practice? Like, how did you learn how to do that?
Yeah, so it's actually extremely rudimentary process as it depicted. It's really a case of sticking you would like to think a sharp needle, but it was often a blunt, possibly infected needle, no matter how much he was trying to clean it, and sticking into ink and sticking into skin. So I think he was learning on the job, and he was learning from Pepan, the other tattooist, and when we did it on the day, we wanted it to feel like he was doing it for the first time. They didn't want me to look practiced or rehearsed.
Of course.
And then when we actually did it, it was this speaks to most of the filming of the series. Everything was done in a very safe and controlled way. But when you are sat at that desk, at that table, and you have this line of supporting artists facing you, all giving these incredibly committed performances, and you ask them to sit down and you start putting a, albeit blunt, instrument into their skin, it's hard for it to not feel too real and for it to feel quite upsetting.
Yeah, of course. And then probably the most important scene that we saw is that at the very end, you meet Gita for the first time. I mean, that whole love story really rides on that first meeting. How do you establish chemistry without really having any conversation?
Well, in the first instance, it was a long process finding our Gita, because she is, of course, such an important role, and I read with quite a few different people, but it became clear quite quickly that Anna was just such an extraordinary actor, had all of the qualities that Gita would need, of being so strong, but also so vulnerable, and she's a very, very present actor. But we did chemistry tests. I mean, I guess that's why they call it chemistry test. And
you had never met her?
No, we met over Zoom a couple of times, and then they flew her to Bratislava for us to meet.
Okay. Did you know her work at all, or
no?
Okay.
And so we had a really wonderful afternoon reading scenes, working with Tali, I guess, doing some workshopping, and it became clear that she was the one. Mm-hmm. And I think that chemistry, as you'll know, it's hard to articulate sometimes. I think it's that feeling of being comfortable with someone, having feeling, because again, in an extremely different way, as with Jonas, who played Boretsky, we were enacting some really difficult scenes, love scenes as well, where we were making ourselves very, very vulnerable, and you just need to feel like you can trust the person you're with, and implicitly I did. And then when it came to that big scene, we knew it was a big deal because for the series and for the show, it's a really pivotal scene, but also because we're telling somebody else's story. That is what happened. That is Lali's account of how he met her. So when you're telling someone else's life like that, you definitely feel this weight of responsibility. But I think we trusted the script, we trusted our own innate kind of connection to each other, and we trusted our director that we'd be able to catch us something.
Can you talk a little bit about what we're going to see in the episodes ahead in terms of the love story?
Yeah, it is the most unique and sort of strange of love stories where everything is about stolen moments. They share very little time together. They are in extreme danger all of the time. So the love story for them, at least within the camp, is, I think, they represent sort of a beacon for one another. Mm-hmm. They're each other's reason to be, and they're the purpose, and they're the reason why they kind of are able to go about their lives. Because I think we felt like it was such a unusual thing to be able to fall in love in a place like that. Because to hold any kind of space in your heart for any kind of joy, to be able to give love, to receive love, we started thinking about it on set almost like an act of defiance, of not allowing yourself to be dehumanized to the point where you can no longer have any kind of human emotion. So we see that throughout, and they're each other's beacon, lighthouse, whatever you want to call it. And but it's the moments where we do share together, because they are so sparse, we hope that they would feel that much more special.
Have you heard from anyone in the family since?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, so Lali and Geeta's son is called Gary.
Okay.
And he lives in Australia. And spending time with him and meeting him has been the most meaningful part of the whole process. He's the closest connection that we have. And we had a big week last week in London doing lots of press, and he spent the whole week with us. And for him to give us his blessing and to be so generous, it was just incredibly moving. He walked into the room and he burst into tears and he was shaking. And it was a very, very powerful moment for all of us. Wow. And really, you have to be so sensitive about these things, because we are telling really his story and his parents' story. And had we not had that kind of support, the whole thing would have just felt very, very different.
Of course. How did they even end up in Australia?
I think they wanted to get as far away as possible.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what Heather told us. And I think that was, they wanted to be as far away from Europe. They didn't go back to Europe for a very, very long time. And it was obviously just a place of such rotten, awful memories for them that they wanted to get away.
Yeah, understood. All right. Well, listen, when we watch this series, it's so hard sometimes just to watch something that involves the Holocaust, even now. But would you say that, this is a unique take on it because it is so hopeful and it is such a beautiful love story amid all the darkness?
Yeah, in the last year we've seen quite a few. We've had The Zone of Interest, we've had the Anthony Hopkins film, One Life, and it's, I think it's very striking that they're all so different in perspective, in tone, the lens. And I think that's because really every take, if you can call it that, or every response to this period of history is going to be uniquely different, based on who's making it and what their own baggage is, what their own relationship is to it. I think that hopefully, if I can say this, the two things that I would like to think make this unique are what you say, is that it's sort of trying to claw back this tiny piece of humanity between these two people, and to really celebrate that. But I think the other massive part about it for us is that because we're telling the story over 6 hours in the TV format, we, as you see, we get to know Lale a little as a young man before the war, get to know him very well during the war, and we get to know him very well after the war. And I think what we liked about that is that very often stories of this nature, they end when the war ends, and there's the sense that there's some kind of closure, which is obviously not the case. And so we wanted to explore the fact that these traumatic events are carried forever, and they're passed on to the next generation and the next generation. And we wanted to really show that the physical and the emotional scars, they just never go away. And we felt like we had the chance to do that.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, congratulations. Thank you. Tattooist of Auschwitz premieres May 2nd on Peacock. Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.